What's up, everybody? Welcome into this live stream here on YouTube tonight. Greatly appreciate everyone who is going to be coming through. I see a few have been waiting on YouTube silently, and I hope everyone is well. Happy Veterans Day to everyone down in the United States, and a thoughtful Remembrance Day to all my friends here in Canada. I went and laid my poppy on the local war memorial today. So did my duty today doing that. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing good, John. How about yourself?
Hey, I'm hanging in there, buddy. It's getting cold up here now, so
I
I think
wish I'm shorts and a t-shirt, and it's like 70 degrees right now. So
no,
I
no, no,
could
no.
use a little bit of your cold. It would be nice.
Yeah, we are. Our highs are now around 52 Fahrenheit now,
Oof.
and it gets down about 45 Fahrenheit at night. So
Yeah, it's been pretty consistently mid 60s, upper 70s here.
oof.
It's just unseasonably warm, and it's weird because the grass is turning brown and the leaves are turning orange, and everything is looking like fall, but it feels like summer.
Mm. I spoke with my mother in Pennsylvania, and they had rain yesterday. First rain they've had in 45 days.
Yeah.
No, it's must be bad down there. So, but you know what's not bad? All the freaking reading we're doing right now. Apparently, there's a ton of it, and we wanted to come on alive and discuss what we're reading or what we just finished reading, what we need to read. Which I don't know about you, Joe, but my pile of to be read is huge.
Yeah.
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 I keep the to be reads right next to my computer. That way, it's a constant reminder that, even when you think you're done reading, there's still another, 5, 6, 7, 24 books ready to go.
Yeah, and none of the books that I'm going to be highlighting this evening are even close to being part of my comps list. So
So you're really in trouble.
I'm deeply in trouble here.
That's one of the things is like, as I consider going back to school and I consider going to get the PhD, it's like, man, I really like reading the books I want to read and not having to feign interest in something that I just have absolutely no desire to read whatsoever.
That's the thing I'm involved with now is that I'm going more towards tech for my PhD, and so history is now becoming more of my hobby again in a way. So it kind of reinvigorates that kid in me who's like, I can read what I want when I want on the side.
Yeah.
But then, God bless them, all the publishing companies who I know keep sending me stuff, and I'm like, well, I guess I got to read this now, and I guess I got to read that now, and so I'm kind of still being they're twisting my arm in a positive way to be like, you need to read this right now. So
well, hey there, publisher companies, take some stress off of John. You can always send some my way.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about customs when you send it to Joe,
Yeah, I'm right here, man. I'm in your backyard.
Yeah. So we're going to go over some of the books that we are reading right now, everybody. We would love to hear from you in the chat what you're reading as well. We're going to be sticking with nonfiction books for this evening, and it could be anything nonfiction, which is good because I got quite a mix of different stuff going on here. And then we're going to be discussing things that we've read or things that are on our to be read pile. So we're going to go in whatever order Joe wants to go in, and I'll just follow along because this was his idea, and I want to give him the first shot at what we're going to talk about. So go ahead, my friend.
Well, I guess I shamefully I keep all of my books. Some of them are in my bedroom, but I keep a stack with me that I read while I'm at work. So I take my long lunch break, I go out for a walk, and I go, well, the first 3 books on my list are all books that are sitting at my desk right now because I alternate, right? So I'm this weird type of reader where I can read one book in the morning, one book at lunch, and one book in the evening, and somehow I'm able to keep all of that together as I go day to day.
Yep.
But
you'll be fine in a PhD program, by the way, if you can do that.
I know. It's just the want, right?
I understand.
There's a freedom, right?
Yeah.
So the book I was actually going to talk a little bit about. It came out, I guess, last year, maybe the year before last, but it's Our Ancient Faith It's by Alan Gelzo, and it's Lincoln, Democracy, and the American Experiment. And I got to admit, the first chapter and a half, I slogged through it. It took probably 2 weeks to read those two chapters, because he was dipping into philosophy and 19th century social thought, and I was like, oh God, I can't do this. But then once I finally got to a point where I was like, you know what, Abraham Lincoln is cool, and it is worth me reading this book to learn more about Lincoln and his thoughts on democracy. I went ahead and just plunged into it. And I have to say, it is really just one of those kind of eye opener books to show just how close and how much of a close run thing safeguarding the experiment and liberty and safeguarding the American form of self-government, how close run of a thing it is and was and still is. I really enjoyed it, but like I said, those first two chapters are just, they're tough.
I'm just sorry. I'm trying to focus here. There we go.
So was I trying to read those chapters.
That's exactly right. We're both having issues focusing. Mine's the camera, and you are doing the first two chapters of Gelzo's work, which that's kind of his MO, in my opinion. I mean, he gets really deep and philosophical, and sometimes can talk over your head. And it's at least that's my experience, and that's just my opinion. It's not
I would say it's not all of them. Not every book is like that, but this one was just especially hard to read for whatever reason. I don't know.
That's interesting. I don't have that one, and it sounds like I'm not going to have that one.
Like I said, just skip the first couple chapters. That's all. Just jump right into it.
Read the first line of every paragraph and just move on.
Yeah. I feel like that's fine.
How do you think we read for comps? Come on, everybody. So what I'm reading right now, and I'm about, oh my gosh, a quarter of the way through, which is scary because I have an interview coming up soon and I need to get caught up, is Simon Reed's Scotland Yard, A History of the London Police Force's Most Infamous Murder Cases. And this is the first time I think I will have read true crime in detail. And what's amazing about this book is he goes all the way back like to the 1830s, and is talking about police work in the 1830s, detective work, quote unquote, in the 1830s. And it's really intriguing to watch how the progression begins in the science behind the stuff that we think of when we think of true crime. This one is actually put out by Pegasus Books, by the way, if anyone's interested. Pegasus sent this to me. Thank you to them. They have a whole Pegasus crime series. And it has some great praise in the blurbs on the back, which I like to look at first, because sometimes I like to connect the names to people I might already know or have interviewed or something like that. But this one, it's an easy read for me because it's larger print, and it's not the Coddington print. It's the nice, print for the people on the street, which is what I need right now. And my eyes appreciate that. But it's great to see that progression chapter by chapter as far as the science behind doing detective work, just policing in general. How that went from sporadic to being walking the beat, sort of speak, and other things involving that. Again, I'm really early, and I'm still in the early 19th century to mid 19th century part of this book, but I've been really enjoying Simon Reed's Scotland Yard, and I'm going to have him on for an interview here in a few weeks, I believe, to discuss. So I got to get cracking on this thing. But yeah, good book.
Really deadlines for school. You still have your self-imposed deadlines, right?
Oh yeah. I have my I have no classes this term that I'm taking. I'm just leading seminar in my PhD stuff. So I'm leading 2 seminars and grading 2 seminars. So I get to kind of make my own reading on my own for this term. So it's nice to have a big, thick book like Simon's book here and be like, I can take my time. I just got to make sure I have it done before I schedule the interview.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. So what you
The
got on your
second-
list next?
The second one, also on the desk, is it's actually it was given to me by our bookshop manager at the Battle Franklin Trust. But it's by Fawn Weaver, and it is her book Love and Whiskey, the remarkable true story of Jack Daniels and the master distiller Nearest Green. And it's about her kind of formulation of her own company, which is Uncle Nearest, which is a distiller now. But it tells the story of we think about Jack Daniel. He is the American whiskey guy, but he could never have gotten to the heights that he did without this black man in Nearest Green, who was his distiller there in Lynchburg and taught him effectively everything he knew about the distilling process. So it kind of goes as far as I've gotten at least up through about halfway through the book. So it talks about, attitudes about race and slavery and the post-Civil War world in which both of these men existed. But it also talks about the thing that, is right there on the front cover, right? How Jack Daniels is made, how this man really masterminded the process for distilling. And I don't know why I got super interested into it, because, normally I'm reading politics or military stuff or, something else. But the last 3 culinary books or whiskey books I've read have really held my attention, and this one's no different, because it also ends with the story of this black woman has formed her own distillery, her own company, her own brand, and it's really kind of risen in fame and recognition all on its own. But it's really just it's a spectacular story. It's really well written, and then really well researched too. She was able to speak with a lot of Daniel's descendants and worked with the people at the distillery in Lynchburg to tell the story as accurately as possible.
That sounds cool. That sounds awesome. So Kojak, thank you for being here in the chat. Greatly appreciate that. Kojak just finished The Longest Day, a classic. Presently reading E. Porter Alexander's Civil War Memoirs, also a classic and a must read for any student of the Civil War, in my opinion. Also reading The Robe. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
Never heard of The Robe.
No.
Now watch. Let this be some classic that has just completely right over our heads.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, you got to read E.P. Alexander a couple times, really.
Especially the conclusion. Read it 3, 4, 20 times.
Yeah.
It doesn't get old.
Yeah, exactly. David, thank you for being here. Marilyn Roach's The Salem Witch Trials, day by day from existing records. Interesting, because I'm descended from 2 of the accused. Wow, David, that's amazing. That is amazing. And if any of you don't know this, there's a TikTok account from the Salem Witch Museum, and they were going crazy last month because they were basically going around to the staff and asking them what people visiting had asked them. And so you can imagine some of the things they were being asked and the things they heard being said are in October in Salem at the Witch Museum. So yeah, it was a good TikTok. It was primo. I'm all for that. So that sounds really interesting, David. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that. So tomorrow I have a strange occurrence. I have an early morning live stream. 10 a.m. is the earliest live stream I think I've done since the digital conference that I put on in 2020. We started that at 9 a.m. in the morning. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., I got Patrick Lewis and James Wellburner coming on to talk about playing at war. Identity and memory in Civil War video games. It just so happened that we all had to say, okay, we got to do this in the morning, so it fits everybody's schedules. But it should be fantastic. Remember that the VOD will be up here on YouTube. The video on demand will be up here. But we would love to see a lot of you in the chat for this, because this book was something I was really looking forward to as a old gamer and all that. I wanted to see what they had to say about Sid Meier's and you know,
And of
all
course, it was overwhelmingly positive about Sid Meier's, right?
oh yeah, yeah. The Oregon Trail made it into here.
Really?
Yeah, snippets of the Oregon Trail made it into here because it talks about indigenous voices, identity, things like that. So it gets really scholarly in that way, which I appreciate because these are things that I have to talk with my students about, the issues of digital identity and avatars and all this stuff. That's what I'm currently teaching, believe it or not, like helping to teach. So went way away from what I used to do. But there was some really cool stuff in here about Red Dead Redemption 2. My friend Jonathan Jones wrote a fantastic article about the echoes of the Civil War in Red Dead Redemption 2. And it was so good. And because I knew Jonathan, I asked him to come on for a separate live stream, which will be in January. And we're just going to talk about Red Dead Redemption 2 and the echoes of the Civil War. But that's all in this book. This one's from LSU Press. And they were kind enough to send me this copy as well. And it's just fantastic. They're talking about hex grid stuff. They're talking about, you know, RPG stuff. They're talking about all kinds of strategic things, but then connecting it to ideas around memory, identity, and race, and so forth and so on. So really, really great book. It makes you think about things that we take for granted when we're gaming in different ways. And I've taken 3 gaming courses in my doctoral training about narrative and identity and things like that. So this fits really well into what I'm talking about now. And I'm sure that I'm probably going, if I get a chance to teach a class like lecture, I'm sure this is probably going to be part of that if I'm talking about digital identity or something to that effect. So yeah, pick this one up if you're into gaming or Civil War memory. It's a fantastic read. It really is. Baron, welcome in. I want to give you a little shout out here. Recently had to write a book review for Stephen Harris's Harlem's Hellfighters. Oh, that sounds interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. I haven't read Harlem Hellfighters book in a while.
I only know of the one. It's kind of like a purple cover on it. I can't remember the author.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. The playing at war though, does it kind of dive into any politics at all, or is it just pretty straightforward in terms of?
It talks about well, they're talking a lot about the politics of the time that the game would have been produced, whichever one it is, and how that affects memory and remembrance and stuff like that. So as you're looking at like the 1990s, you're getting a certain feel to it. You know, you're getting more of that kind of popular culture, popular mythology, lost cause stuff. And then it's moving into newer things as people try to push the envelope a little bit with the ideas around putting an enslaved character into a game. And how do you do that properly? And, you know, how's it used? There's one in there that you'd have to read about that they tried to use in a school and it just went haywire. Because it didn't it's just a game with an avatar or, you know, NPC, and no one has any lesson plans. They don't know how to use this. And it's like, if you don't have a lesson plan, you can't teach. So yeah. So it does come into politics and memory at different decades as you advance through it. Yeah. It's really good. Really good. What else we got, Joe?
I actually have this one sitting right here because this is one that I've kind of been bouncing back and forth about reading and reading next. And I've sort of snuck a chapter in here and there. But it's Black Freedom, White Resistance, and the Red Menace by Yasuhiro Katagiri. So it's LSU Press 2014, I think. But it kind of discusses the role that the anti-communist movement played in suppressing a lot of the more leftist views of the civil rights movement through the 1950s and 1960s, and how every time that there is this push towards civil rights, black civil rights. White resistance usually takes form and says something like, well, there's communists embedded in all of these, groups. So anyways, like I said, I've snuck a peek here and there as I've kind of dabbled at it. But this is on a giant shelf of civil rights books that I'm just dying to kind of get into when I can have a break from reading Civil War stuff, or a break from current events that are too stressful to read about other pushes for stressful times in current events.
Yeah.
And I guess it's one that I've really kind of thought about it, because I've been researching and working on all of these things about the February 1946 Columbia race riot in Tennessee. And one of the early kind of criticisms and one of the things used in the court trial against some of the black defendants is that there's ties to communism. And so it's just, where did they grab that? Well, there's a perfect playbook. And it also coincides with that era of really rash anti-communist theory and anti-communist belief. It's McCarthyism. And it's this kind of radicalized anti-communism that really hadn't come onto the stage by 1946, but you can see kind of roots of it as we go. So I am excited about actually sitting down and really diving into that one, though.
Yeah. So you're going from Reconstruction 1.0 to Reconstruction 2.0.
Pretty much.
Basically. Yeah. That's the way I always thought of the civil rights era, as Reconstruction 2.0, and we're probably going through Reconstruction 3.0 right now.
We did this live stream to not think about it.
We did. Let's talk about anti-fascism right now. Here we go. Awakening the Spirit of America. Paul Sparrow.
Oh, come on.
On your list too?
Yeah, all because of you.
Excellent.
I went and bought it. It's all your fault.
There you go, Paul. There it is, baby. There's another one for you. I was so happy to have Paul on to talk about this book because Paul's the former director of the FDR Library and Museum. What better person to have on and have write this book than Paul Sparrow? So this one was really great. It was an easy read. I read it in 2 days. Mm-hmm. And I've always been an FDR guy. I just like FDR. He had his faults. Everybody has their faults. Nobody's perfect. Okay. So, and Paul and I went over that. But the way he could connect with an audience is something I've always admired. And I'm like, man, this guy can really, he knows how to connect with an audience. He's got it down to a science. And so when you're talking about Lend-Lease, when you're talking about, pay cash and carry, things like that, that's all in here where FDR is seeing that, hey, England is it. This is all that's left. Mm-hmm. Once the fall of France happens, England is all that's left to fight against the fascists. And he's trying to figure out a way to get around the system, so to speak, and figure out how to get armaments and things to the anti-fascists. Meanwhile, Charles Lindbergh says, no, we shouldn't be getting involved at all, and we should let them go, and et cetera, et cetera. Germany is the way forward now in Europe, and he joins the America First Committee, and they have all their big rallies, and Lindbergh is there. And so you have this back and forth between these, these popular culture, dare I say, icons of the period. I mean, you have Charles Lindbergh, the most famous aviator in America at that time. And then you have the president of the United States, and they're sparring through the media and going back and forth about what America should do. Should they be isolationist or not? Should they stand up against the fascists, or should they, keep the ocean between them and, what's going on over there?
I tell you what I appreciated about you and Paul's discussion was your inclusion of some of his other critics, some of Roosevelt's other critics, and in Coughlin and Huey Long. But it brought me back to my graduate program of major problems in U.S. history seminar class I did, where we had to read Voices of Protest about Father Coughlin. And I was outed as a Roosevelt apologist Because my review was scathing, because essentially the book was doing a pretty unabashed job, an unbiased job of explaining Coughlin's criticism of FDR. But I guess I'm just something of a hardliner, man. I was 11 years old the first time I went to Hyde Park and saw the car and saw the house and saw the library and visited the gravesite. Childhood hero in FDR. I wasn't going to sit back and take that. And just to hear, you guys' kind of thoughts about it, and especially get Paul's perspective on it. Clearly it worked, because I went and I bought the book as soon as I got out of the car, and I was walking into the grocery store and got on Amazon. So
yeah,
I apologize I didn't buy it from a better bookstore. I got it from Jeff Bezos, but take it.
Yeah.
Like FDR, we can't all be perfect.
That's right. That's right. I mean, but yeah, I appreciate that. That one got quite a few interesting comments, and you can imagine what the comments were in that one. But it was a perfect time to be talking about that. It was a perfect time to be discussing these kinds of things, and really putting all this forward and saying, what were the two sides to this argument? What was the everlasting effect of it? And the thing that really intrigued me was the moment Pearl Harbor was attacked, Lindbergh was gung ho, and he's like, "We're gonna fight back, and we're gonna do all this." So he was really invested in the defense of America in his own way, and a lot of people were. Remember, the First World War is still haunting people at this time. We lost 110,000 men killed. And people sometimes still question, why did we even do it, and things like this. This goes into memory of the First World War, and why, Second World War is bigger than the First World War in historical memory and things. It all goes back to the questioning of whether we should have been involved or not. And Lindbergh and his allies are some of those who were then questioning, should we have been involved in the First World War? If not, then why should we be involved in this one? And it leads to these two men duking it out, so to speak, vocally in front of their audience and trying to figure out what's next for America. But Lindbergh, brings himself back to the forefront when the war goes on, and volunteers and helps out with the Army Air Corps and beyond, and other allied nations, and picks himself back up in the way that Lindbergh could. And then going back to what Joe just talked about, everyone becomes an anti-communist. so there you go. And that's the end of the book, basically. So this is a great book, though. And I'm glad you bought it, Joe.
Just how great and how timely, right? What a great discussion for you guys to have had, and for Paul to have put the book out when he did. All the movement towards isolationism that we see today, and this kind of pulling inwards in the country. I mean, heck, they're even using the same slogan, America First. And it is kind of frightening. You read the Timothy Snyder book, and once they tell you history doesn't repeat itself, but it does instruct, and we're looking at a crazy playbook right now,
So. History definitely rhymes. I have to go back on my bookshelf back here and get a book that I forgot to grab. What do you have next, Joe? Was that it?
Well, that was on the list. You're now going to make me skip a book. Thanks.
You're welcome.
The other one, and these are the next three are ones I don't have, but this last one here is one that's actually I did the Audible, because I can listen to the book while I drive, and with a basically hour commute to and from work, it's a great way to knock out a book and not ever have to really worry about a shelf or anything. But On Freedom by Timothy Snyder, because the timely read is On Tyranny, but I figured, let's go optimism. Let's go cheerful, good tidings, and On Freedom was next on the list. And having read On Tyranny when it came out in 2017, and having just reread it the other day, because it's only a couple hundred pages, if even, I turned around and I read that one, found it at the bookstore. It just came out a couple months ago. And listening to Snyder talk about our approach to politics, our approach to this kind of failure to understand one another, or maybe outright ignoring of one another's thoughts and beliefs on this crazy road to this journey to acquire our own sense of freedom.
Mhm.
I thought I needed to read that one, but since you took away uh, you took away Awakening the Spirit of America,
Yeah.
that was kind of my fallback, because it's an Audible, so I didn't necessarily read it. I more or less just kind of listened to it.
Well, I mean, that's fine. Some of us are, you know the drill. Some of us are so busy, or we're in our car or a lot. Might as well have an Audible going. You
I
know.
liked it. I will say. I mean, it gave me some sense of confidence, some sense of hope, which is
Well, there you go.
always good, you know.
Yeah, you need something that will bring you positive value, and especially in these times. So that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Uh, I had to go back on the shelf because I had to grab this one. It goes back again to the statements and questions that we have now, but from both sides of the border, and that's the Good Allies, Tim Cook,
Mm-hmm.
and how Canada and the United States fought together to defeat fascism during the Second World War. So again, it's leapfrogging off of that FDR book, but this is a great book because this relationship hasn't really been showcased in this way before.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about Canada in the Second World War, it's usually Canada and Britain. When we talk about the United States and FDR, like we just talked about, it's usually FDR and Churchill. So this is great because now it's a North-South relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's looking at Canada and the United States and the relationship between King, the Prime Minister, and FDR. It's also looking at the soldiers and how they reacted to each other. The idea of Americans coming to help defend places like Newfoundland, which is still not part of Canada at this point. It will be part later. It's its own dominion. So having Americans go to Newfoundland to help, with defense was a question that kept being brought up because they're like, are they going to want to leave? when they do this, issues of Iceland and things like that are all brought up in this book. For those of you who don't know, this is Tim's 19th book. He's a legend. He really is. And it's not because I know him. The guy is a legend. Okay. This guy was on this morning. I don't know how many years he's done this. He was on the CBC this morning, live from Ottawa for the Remembrance Day ceremony that we have at the National War Memorial. Mm-hmm. He's done it for a number of years. He's the go-to military historian in Canada. You need to understand military history of Canada, you go to Tim Cook. That's just the way it is. He's at the Canadian War Museum. He's the man. And I'm a huge fan of his work because it is so readable. It's so accessible. I think the first book I ever got of his was in 2010, At the Sharp End, which is about the Canadians in the First World War. It's part of a 2-part series. But I appreciate this one because being an American living in Canada, we had to talk about it together, which we did. And it was fascinating because about 30,000 Americans came north to fight with the Canadians in the Second World War. And there were just as many, if not more, who fought in the First World War with Canada. So there's this idea of the border and this porous border and getting back and forth across because family and friends live there and all that stuff. So speaking of the political end of Canada needing to possibly depend on the United States for things or vice versa, this interesting North American alliance and relationship that goes back a ways, but has that rocky past of the War of 1812 and the American Revolution and things.
Bygones.
Oh yeah, well that comes up in the book where they're like, the Americans are starting to build the Alaska Highway out west, and on the radios or on the phones, when the Americans are being called by the Canadians, they laughingly refer to themselves as the Army of Occupation. And so there's this going back and forth with each other. Like, do they really mean it or not? Are they going to leave when they're done? What's going to happen here? It's an interesting relationship, but the Canadians do not forget the War of 1812. and the burning of York, now Toronto, and American invasions, and on and on and on. But Tim really points out that at the beginning of the war, 1937, I believe, or 1936, don't quote me on that, it's before the war, both countries have invasions of each other planned out just in case. And there's a Canadian invasion of America, which is just crazy because they're hoping
not to be confused with Canadian bacon with
no,
John Candy.
No, this is, I mean, the only way they invade now is through like reruns of the Red Green Show or something like that. No, but they actually had this really weird invasion plan where they were going to invade the United States and hope that Australia comes in to help invade the Pacific part of the United States. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And the Americans have basically a War of 1812 2.0 style invasion of Canada, which would have gone a lot better than the Canadian way of doing it the opposite. So they're already planning these things out just in case. And now they have to really rely on each other and feel each other out and say, okay, are they going to come along? We're involved in this, but they're still neutral. What are they doing? It's a really, really good book. And Tim does amazing work. And I highly recommend anyone who's interested in Canadian history or the Canada-America relationship, you need to read Tim Cook. It's just really good and accessible. So grab it.
What else we got as a choice, right?
No. I mean, Granite Steen is a great Canadian historian, and props, respect to him. And Pierre Burton was a great Canadian historian, probably one of the best known for popular history. He's kind of Pierre Burton is kind of like the McCullough of Canadian history. That's the way I'll say it. He made history for the people. So Tim is in that vein with military history, but with the more with the digitized records on his side. So yeah, it's really good. It's more authentic because Pierre sometimes could get involved in some of the mythology of certain things. And Tim's very
maybe like an Ambrose style with that one.
Yeah. And Pierre's mid 20th century author. So he's at that time of like Bruce Catton, stuff like that. That's the way I would say Burton reads like. He reads like Catton. Catton in the Civil War. Burton does everything. He does War of 1812. He does one on the Niagara, stuff like that. The Transcontinental Railroad. So, yeah, read some Canadian history, folks. There's some interesting stuff out there. So, what else you got, Joe?
In the same vein of popular, approachable history, approachable military history. People that know me, John, we've talked about him before, and I've been really fortunate to have him on our show on Homebrew History, but then also to become friends with James Holland. And Jim wrote this summer, kind of the second half of his War in Italy series, which is Casino 44. Yeah, did I take that right off your list? Did I?
No, I got one more. It's fine.
Oh, good. But what I love about the way that, in having read everything that he's written, I mean it, even the 100-year centennial history of the RAF, which when I brought it to him to sign, he looked at it and he said, "I can't believe you read this. It's terrible. I can't believe you read this." But anyways, having read everything that he's written, it's amazing to see his style change and his approach change. And then in this latest book, and then in his next book, which I think he said he's going to do on naval efforts in the North Atlantic, 42-43, he's going almost completely primary source and going entirely present tense, which is dangerous, right? Because one of my least favorite books is Decision in the West by Albert Castell about the Atlanta campaign, which is written in the present tense, and it bothers me, and I can't stand reading it because I just shout like, it happened in the past. It can't happen now. But what kind of got him started on this was, I guess maybe it was Sicily 43. He stopped using memoirs as a source and was only then using diaries and contemporary letters. And he realized that he couldn't get sometimes the subject verb agreement of his writing to line up with their writing, and the tenses to line up. So now he's just gone completely present tense, which is one thing I'm actually really excited to see how he does with that. But then also to tell a story of, I think, maybe one of the most epic battles in Italy that draws in all the attention, but people act like it's its own thing. It just, okay, yeah, there's all the defenses on the various German defensive lines, and then there's a battle for Monte Cassino. Okay, and then they capture Rome, as opposed to one just grinding, hard-nosed campaign. And I think that's probably one of the things that I'm most excited about seeing in it. And two, just another book from Jim to go on the shelf that's already sagging in the center because there's too many books on there.
Yeah, that's excuse me. That's I had this sent to me, and I was like, okay, it's time for me to really get into, Casino 44, because I have talked to dozens of veterans who were at Casino and over the years, and I'm like, okay, I want to see what James Holland has to say about this. This is on my to be read pile. Actually, I haven't gotten to it yet. And
think about, everybody's there, right?
Yeah,
this is one of those battles where you can truly say it's an allied effort.
Yeah,
Poles, there's Canadians, there's British, there's Americans. Heck, there's even some French. It's an incredible story that I think is ripe for him to tell. And then too, I mean, another great book on Casino by itself is Monte Cassino by Peter Caddick Adams. I mean, both of those books are 10 Armies in Hell. Both of these books are going to be exceptional. I mean, Peter's is great, and if I know anything about James and how he writes, this book is going to be excellent too. So it's on my to be read, but it's one of those that has to wait until I'm actually back over there, or I order through UK Amazon, because I'm very particular. They all have to be the same cover style. I can't have the American version. I can't do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I never knew that about you.
I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to James Holland books. What can I say?
Hey, you say snob. Some people might say British. I don't know. Who knows? What would Al say about it? That's what I want to know.
Well, I mean, he liked it. He did the audio for it, so he must have.
But what would he think about you needing all the covers from one?
I don't know. I think I probably need to tell them about my need for the covers to be the same. It's true, though. When you look at a bookshelf, don't you want uniformity in some sense? I can't stand the chaos. I need to have that uniformity where they're all the same type font, everything.
I kind of thrive on chaos. I mean, I have 100 books on the floor, so it's kind of like.
I can't really say anything right now. A lot of my books are packed away in boxes, so
there you go. There you go.
There's all that chaos here too.
I'm a guy who had to move 3 times in 3 years, so I'm just kind of like, it's here somewhere. It's that pile on the floor. I don't know. I'll find it sooner or later. So I'm going to take us way back here a little bit, because we've been talking about Second World War and some Civil War stuff and things like that, Scotland Yard. This is on my to read list. This came from UNC Press, and I want to give a special shout out to them simply because Peter Carmichael introduced me to them, and this was 2019. In 2020, he and I started doing those interviews together, and in 2019, he passed my name along to UNC Press because he was in with them, and told them that, hey, send this guy some stuff whenever you get the chance. He's a student of this stuff, and they have stuck with me for 4 years. And I'm really appreciative of that, especially when I moved internationally. I'm like, if you don't want to send stuff through customs, I totally understand. You know,
Right.
it's
Right.
more money and whatever, but they've been generous and have been sending me things, and I'm very appreciative of that. And so I'm like, well, I'm sitting in Canada. I'm in loyalist country here. A lot of the American loyalists moved here right after the war. Butler's Rangers has their barracks down the road from me. 10-minute drive, 15-minute drive, and I spend a lot of time looking at that kind of stuff, loyalist country things going on there. And so I got Von Scribner's new book, Under Alien Skies: Environment, Suffering, and the Defeat of the British Military in Revolutionary America. And I was really surprised when I opened this up and realized that he starts basically as if we were coming across the ocean. And he talks about the seas and just the environment on the ship and the environment being on a ship in the Atlantic and things like that. So you're seeing the trajectory of the life of a British soldier coming overseas to fight in North America. And I don't have that many books on the Revolution. I was mainly a 19th century, early 20th century guy. And I realized that I needed to really up my game because next year is the 250th of Lexington and Concord. And I think I should know something by then before that really starts to happen.
Yeah.
Knowing that I've read like Red Coat and things like that throughout the years, but especially being here, I wanted to read this. And I'm a big fan of interdisciplinarity. I am in an interdisciplinary program at my university. I'm not getting a PhD in history. I'm getting a PhD in digital humanities and technology, but it's interdisciplinary. So I can touch on the history end of things while I talk about this, and I can talk about certain other things as well. This being environment and memory of defeat and ideas surrounding defeat and loss and suffering and psychological effects and things like that. It's interdisciplinary. And that's what I really am intrigued by in our craft. When you're looking at the history field now, you're seeing a lot more interdisciplinarity with things. I mean, think of the Civil War and the Age of Nationalism, Niels Eichhorn, the book that he co-authored. Interdisciplinary all the way through, comparative history, going all the way through. Look for this to really take off. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see more comparative histories out there and more interdisciplinary histories because we need it. And I really love it. And I know that some of my students who I've talked to when I did do stuff in the history department, they really liked it because maybe they're not into history, but they're into environment or they're into something else. So Under Alien Skies by Von Scribner is on my to be read list. And I am currently in talks to get Von Scribner on to discuss this book on a live stream / podcast here in the future, but I'm already scheduling into 2025. So it might be a couple more months, my friends, but 2025 isn't that far away. So
yeah, I keep reminding myself, I got booked to go and talk in Cleveland in February 25. And I keep thinking, I was like, oh, that's next year. Oh, that's next year. All of a sudden, that's really only 3 months away. And that just doesn't sit well with me at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get it. Grant by Chernow, that's one. Yeah, it's one everyone reads from time to time. Cleat by James Lee Burke. Interesting.
What do you think? Which is the best Grant biography that you've read?
Between who?
You just have to tell me what's your best. I have mine.
What's yours?
American Ulysses by Ron White.
Yeah,
I think it's the most humanizing of all of them.
That's a tough one to beat.
Yeah,
that really is a tough one to beat. It
makes him a person in a way that I think Chernow makes him into like a almost unstoppable legend.
Yeah, Yeah, anything that humanizes the character
Mhm.
is something that I gravitate towards because just like we said with FDR earlier, flaws,
Yeah.
faults,
Yeah.
and things like that. I don't like when people write a book about Grant and they constantly harp on supposed alcoholism.
Right.
It's like, come on,
We've done this.
we beat this horse.
Yeah.
Okay, stop it. And you see that with other characters too throughout history.
Mhm.
People are just bringing it up, and it's like, okay, this isn't new. Let's give me something else.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. American Ulysses is probably, in my mind, one of the best, if not the best, out there so far. But I don't want to irritate Brooks Simpson.
I was gonna say, yeah, Brooks is because Brooks is
'Cause
early.
Brooks-
What is it? Can't think of the subtitle, but it's Grant from like 52 to 60,
yeah,
Life in Turmoil or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah. And I met Brooks, and he's awesome guy. I really enjoyed talking with him. But yeah, as an overall kind of thing,
Mhm.
I agree with you on that. That's the one I got to go with.
Well, I have one last book.
Yep.
It's a new one, LSU,
Oh, okay.
through Court Carney, Reckoning with the Devil, Nathan Bedford Forrest, and Myth and Memory.
Oh,
I got to tell you, I'm so far removed from being a Forrest apologist, but I got my hands on an advanced copy or an advanced look at it, and instantly the introduction just sucked me right in, and I mean just I'm going to read a part of it because I really think it is worth hearing. The image of Nathan Bedford Forrest, slave trader, Confederate general, Klansman, reflects and refracts infinite reactions and responses. A century and a half after his death, Forrest continues to portend violence and mayhem, a battered icon representing the totality of the Southern past. He skulks across the Southern memorial landscape with an uneasy gait of a ghost hobbled by the relentless shifts of time and perception. The Forrest image underscores how omissions and erasures continuously recast history and memory into an endless loop of transformation. He collapses the distance between past and present so utterly that examining any particular moment, 2017, say, or 1998, or 1958, or 1905, sets off a reverberation that ripples backward and forward.
wow. Who wrote that?
Court Carney.
Court Carney. Wow.
And it's brand new.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, July 24.
Oh wow, yeah.
That's in the to be reads, but I actually have the physical copy at work, because it's just where I keep a lot of books right now, anyhow. But it's interesting because I know the last chapter or so talks a lot about not only just his death, but about the memorialization of him across Tennessee. And I mean, this is a man who has or had, more appropriately, had more monuments dedicated to him in this state than any of the 3 presidents of the United States of America from Tennessee. And I mean, it's just it's an incredible thing about that. But then too, put him in juxtaposition to some of the other kind of civil rights leaders and icons that come out of the state, or just musicians even. Dolly Parton is recognizably more famous than Nathan Bedford Forrest. John Lewis is seemingly a far more, I think, influential individual to build monuments to in Tennessee maybe than Forrest is. And I can hear the rallying cries and the pitchforks rattling out in the distance, but as I say this, in Tennessee. But it's always worth getting another kind of look at the man and the legend. And that's one of the reasons I've always liked Brian Steele Wills's book, the Battle from the Start, or its second title, Greatest Cavalryman of the War, because like we just said about Grant, it humanizes him. It takes this guy who is completely, in some circles, totally vilified and turned into a devil, and other circles, completely a god and total saint among all men. And here he is, this incredibly flawed, deeply um, controversial individual, and yet there's still something to be learned about him and his place in history. And so I had to get the Reckoning with the Devil book.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've had discussions with other historians for years, is that you hear both sides of how people feel about a person in history, and usually the truth is in here somewhere. you know, usually there's something floating in the center where it's like, that might be more, because it seems like a lot of people just take nuggets and they push them to their component sides, and they're just like, okay, that's it. I'm not defending anyone. I'm just saying that when you look,
he's a very difficult person to defend too, which is
I
think that's one of the great things about Carney, is he comes out right in the very beginning, and the first introduction is, why does this guy even matter? And the next almost 6 or 7 pages are, yes, he was a notorious slave trader. Yes, he was a brutal general on the battlefield. Yes, he was the first imperial grand wizard of the clan. And yes, ultimately he dies, and his monument is at the kind of center point of a flashpoint in the civil rights movement in the 60s in Memphis, but then in 2017 and 18 and 19 and 20 in more recent memory in Memphis until its removal. I had to get it.
That sounds really interesting.
See where, and two, how it ranks with other new Confederate biographies, right? Because we've talked about this in the past. Is a new way to write about Confederates is there. Gelzo did it. Now Elizabeth Varron has done it. And now Carney has done it, and now we'll see, how that stacks up against some of the tales of old.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, welcome in. Currently reading A Worst Place in Hell: How the Civil War Battle of Fredericksburg Changed the Nation.
Oh, that's a good one.
I haven't read it. I've heard wonderful things about it.
It's really good. Really good.
And
it's like that it looks at language and literature is so fascinating, that you can get Abraham Lincoln and Walt Whitman thrown on the same page is pretty excellent.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for letting us know what you're reading right now. That means a lot. We love to see you here. I don't have any more books to highlight. I ran out of my pile.
Well, since you stole mine, I'm out.
You stole my James Holland book. That was my other pick. I was gonna suck up to James Holland just for a little bit and be like, "Hi, I read your stuff." But yeah.
Sorry. Hey, Jim. Good to see you.
So don't forget, everybody in the chat, the Playing at War. We're having that talk tomorrow morning. I need you to get up early, get your coffee, and we're going to discuss this book all morning tomorrow morning, 10 to 11, right here on my YouTube channel. Patrick and Trey are coming on to discuss this, so please be here for that, because we would love to see you in the chat to talk about new things and new ways of looking at history. Gaming history isn't new, but the way that these guys and all the contributors in that book approached it is really intriguing and wonderful, and should be read, because sometimes we forget popular culture mixing with this stuff outside of like movies. There's more to it than that, and they really do a great job with that. Joe, so what book of mine are you reading next? The FDR book?
Yeah, that's the next one for me. Although the to be read is one of those things where until I actually crack the book open, that list can move, right? You could be the last book I'll read, and you'll be the first one that I pick up next. So
I got an email today that I'm being sent a book about Patton's Ghost Army. And so I'm like, that might knock something down lower on the to be read pile, because that's really intriguing to me. And, I've been wanting this book a while, and they just reached out and said they're going to send it. So I get it. Certain things fluctuate, but but I hope everybody keeps reading, because this knowledge base is expanding and expanding week by week. There's great books coming out from multiple publishers, and there's some amazing works that you can get pretty cheaply, especially when you get to Black Friday. Make sure you look at the publishing houses or publishing companies, excuse me, around Black Friday. Sometimes they have coupon deals, and buy it from them and enjoy it, because sometimes you can get a really good deal and you can find out some amazing stuff. And Joe and I tried to give you a couple to think about in your travels, and hopefully you added a few to your wish list. But my friend, it was good to talk with you and talk about some books.
Always a pleasure, John.
Everybody, please take care, be well, be safe. That's the most important thing. I want you to be safe. Get ready, because the cold air is coming from my area of the world. I'm going to send some your way.
Please do.
Joe won't be in shorts for much longer, unless he tries to be Canadian, because they wear them up here most of the year round. Yeah, I can't do that.
50 degrees and I'm in jeans and jackets, and
I don't wear shorts.
Tanker jackets.
Yeah, I don't wear shorts.
My shins have seen the light of day in the winter ever.
I have ostrich legs. It's not going to work. Not going to work. I'm definitely Scottish. I have legs for the kilt. Okay, that's the way it is, baby. Everybody, have a great evening. Be well. Be safe. I will talk to you tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Get your butt here. Get in the chat. We want to see you on here talking about Sid Meier's Gettysburg and Oregon Trail and all that stuff. Take care, everybody.